Hey guys, welcome back. It is Adam Lane Smith, attachment specialist, and today I have a wonderful guest I have been waiting to talk to. I've been following him for months, watching his material. There's a few things I love about his approach that I'm going to call out during the interview today. This is Logan Cohen. He's a psychotherapist. He's also a coach and a creator. He teaches people on his TikTok channel, which is amazing, by the way, Logan. It's whatever you're doing on there is right. Keep going.
Exactly.
Guys, today we're going to pick his brain. I'm going to have a lot of information, especially for men, but also for people who have men in their life and for everybody who needs better mental health, which really is all of us. So, Logan, welcome to the show. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself so people know what to expect?
Sure, sure. Thanks for having me. Um, I am, yeah, as you said, those are my professional titles and some areas that I function in professionally. I've been doing this work my whole life and grew up in a household that was um, ridden with some mental health and addiction stuff. So I'm really direct. I shoot from the hip. It's also pretty evidence-based. Like if we would get into any more clinical or what the proof or verifiability or reliability of the information is, we can cover that too. But I
Mhm.
tend not to operate. It's not going to feel like going to be at a healthcare clinic. It'll feel different.
Good. I love that. That is one thing that I talk about a lot is how men tend not to want to seek out the clinic experience as often. They want a more personal approach, they want a direct approach. Many men do. And when they get that, they tend to thrive with it. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. I think one of the basic tenets of what we're taught socially and culturally as a part of manhood is not asking for help and not admitting if we're hurt unless there's something, we're bleeding out somewhere and other people would be identifying that. So especially about a mental health area, the more direct everything is, the better it tends to be for men.
Absolutely. Not just direct, but maybe directive as well, giving a little more direct, clear guidance on what to do. Would you say that?
Absolutely. Think again, we tend to be trained and socialized to be goal directed. Period. And to want to take very direct advice, sometimes unsolicited, and give very direct advice, sometimes unsolicited.
That is very
Yeah.
true. That is very true. Now, what got you focused, especially on working with men in this way? What was it that led to that?
Um, it was childhood friends dying from deaths of despair,
Mhm.
from suicides and overdoses and alcohol toxicity.
I hear that. I had one
Uh,
of the male family members that I had do that as well, and it
it's
drives you.
incredibly common, unfortunately. Uh, and and that's what I realized when I started doing the research and tried to figure out what was going on. It started out more of just hurting and wanting answers and trying to figure that out. So that's what I
Absolutely.
did, and I realized that as men, we are there's so many narratives these days, especially with the socio-political pendulum swinging back and forth as it is,
Mhm,
and the Me Too movement and the current
mhm,
feminist critique
mhm.
of a lot of modern day institutions is a super important viewpoint. But a lot of times the pendulum is swinging so hard that when that happens, what people hear in their black and white thinking and being so raw right now is that the patriarchy means all men are bad and feminism means that you hate men and that kill the rich and eat the poor kind of thing. um, and that the system obviously serves men so well because they have some privileges in specific areas, when in fact it's quite the opposite. It tends to be a pretty core elite kind of oligarchy of people who hold all the resources. Um, and Men tend to be socialized to devalue our own health and well-being so much and over identify with being a hunter warrior, now called provider and protector, so much that we do not care about our own health and safety if that means getting the job done. um,
Absolutely.
and then when we fail, the concept of seppuku, kind of taking yourself out by your own sword, since we're also socialized to be so much more comfortable with violence.
Mhm.
That's what's necessary, that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
It's very easy to direct that sword onto ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just had so I'm on Twitter and I just had a tweet go viral that said, men when they go into therapy, men go in, but they're looking for something different. Male depression tends to be fixated around that sense of that learned helplessness, powerlessness in their own life. They have no power to accomplish a task, they have no mission, they have no purpose, or they can't reach it, or they can't end their own pain. Male depression and male despair seems to be focused not as much around love and like nobody loves me. There is that, but it seems to be there is nothing I can do in my life. I am completely powerless. Can you speak to that? Is that something that you see a lot with men and that you help them accomplish?
Yes, I think that does to tend to be the primary layer of the presenting concerns, what men tend to be talking about when they have depression. And lacking purpose and meaning, absolutely. Uh, the industrial revolution that brought in us into modern civilization was not that long ago.
Right.
If you kind of take a look at the evolution of humankind, this is a pretty new development. And what we've seen happening in this space is corporations can come in and treat human beings like cogs in an assembly line, like you're building a brand new Ford or something.
Mhm.
And since men have been socialized to identify with being the primary provider for so long, it's very much an element. And they're willing to, kind of have an old world mentality about what we're willing to do with work. And if we do that, we get picked apart by institutions who don't give. Can I use profanity?
If you wish, yes. It's
Okay, like
appropriate here.
don't give two shits about our
Yeah,
well-being at all.
it's
They just want
appropriate
to
here.
spit us out.
Yeah.
Where a couple hundred years ago, maybe a little bit more, if you're dude born, your last name is Smith because you came from generations of blacksmiths and you work with iron because that's what everyone has always done, and you build a carriage with the carpenter who's also inherited their craft from generations, and then you watch the landowner go to the royal house to take care of some important meetings, and the last 2 weeks of your life have been invested in creating this functional tool for making that happen.
Mhm.
Very, very, really know what we're doing here.
Yes.
Now we're just in turnstiles and being hided for cents on the dollar for executive boards and wondering why we're not connected to our daily output.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is no direct output that we can see and say, I did this, I accomplished this. And then we go home with what maybe little paycheck we might have. And there's a disconnect with our family as well. And our kids are put into that same machine. And
So
it is so real. So many fathers don't know how to connect to their own kids because they don't know how to connect to anybody. Is that
over,
something that you work with? It's fatherhood as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. So I'm a marriage and family therapist by trade. Uh, I'm also happen to be a dad. 7-year-old boy and identical twin girls that just turned 2, and they're amazing. Um, and also, worked in community mental health for over a decade before I started private practice stuff, and
Yeah.
have always thought about family systems as an important component of human life and community
Mhm.
life. But the what research is showing right now is that the concept of like the deadbeat dad thing is
Yeah.
not very real anymore. Most significantly more, most dads are showing up and ready to dig in. Over 50% report that they have no idea what they're doing.
Yes. That is it.
And again, like if we think about where we just came from, we just came from isolated farming communities. And especially in this country, most people are going to be raised by folks who are either raised on a farm or raised by folks who were raised on a farm because everything is historically so rural. You have a
Yep.
few of these Bay areas that you have metropolitan urban buildup for longer periods of time. But for the most part, we're farmland, man.
Yeah.
So we have been socialized to be working dogs that don't come inside at night. And just because you have kids and love them does not mean that you know how to come inside.
Bingo. Bingo. I love that so much. So I'm an attachment specialist, and that's what I do is teach attachment. I retired from therapy to just focus on how we are supposed to connect. And I teach a lot of generational attachment. And that has broken down, especially over the last 100 years. Like you said, we moved from the rural areas into the cities, and then it started disintegrating all the social nets we had, all the connections we should have had, all the socialization pieces of, hey, here's how to be a dad, here's how to be a brother, here's how to be a husband, here's how to
Well,
be a man, all the things that we should have known how to do. And then here's how to connect to other human beings when you need help. So much us men, and I'll give you a moment to speak to this, but so much us men, we hit a point when we're processing problems. We observe the problem and then we try to act upon it. And if we can act upon it, we feel pretty good about ourselves. When we get stuck, sometimes there's problems we are it is impossible to solve on our own. And when we have broken attachment issues, our brain says, I can't connect to other people because I'm either a burden or I'm unacceptable or they won't act in good faith with me. So I got to do this all alone. And the brain starts clicking. It's missing that gear. It can't shift into the next gear to accomplish that task. And men get stuck because they can't even connect to each other. Can you speak on that and maybe a little bit about what you do to help men learn to connect to other men or to people to give them solutions?
totally. So first, I mean, about the attachment piece, if you think about the social and cultural expectations of what it means to be a man, you have a little boy gets upset about something. The how many movies have we seen? How many of us have experienced versions of stop crying,
Yeah.
come back to me when you're ready to talk like a man,
Yes.
which means be restricted. Don't share your emotions. This is not a self-regulation. This is not a mutual regulation space.
Right.
We're exchanging administrative ideas. We are not going to be functioning with um, the warm tribal dynamics, the way that
Right.
human beings evolved to be in
Correct.
hunter-gatherer societies for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years.
100%.
So what tends to happen is I would say 90% of men probably have a primarily avoidant attachment style. Unfortunately, just because we are so avoidant of, we've been taught to be and conditioned to be avoidant of our own vulnerable feelings. And when we have them, we get told, hey, you cannot be welcome in the tribe. We're going to shun you until you repress those. So we
Yes.
learn to shun them ourselves.
Yes.
And to the degree where we tend to even become numb to them.
Mm.
What that numb actually is, if you dig enough on it, is shame.
Yes. Absolutely.
Over time, if you have enough shame and repression around something,
Mm.
the system of the central nervous system of our brain, like according to polyvagal theory, broken into
Mhm.
three main components. You
Mhm.
have the ventral vagus nerve, which is like rest, recover, digest. You
Mhm.
have the dorsal vagus nerve, which is more of the depressy, hypoarousal, feeling ashamed, inappropriate guilt, low energy. And then you have the hyperarousal, the sympathetic vagus nerve, which is more like fight flight.
Mhm.
So, around emotions, which are supposed to be just energy of intuition that are floating around inside of all of us constantly,
Right.
get super repressed and we get hyper focused and fixated on maybe three notes out of a 20-note scale.
Yes.
So, learning how to interact with others more warmly and more availably, it's not a word, but we'll rock with it.
No, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
Requires first learning how to attune to yourself.
Yes.
And there are these layers that you have to go through. If you're sitting with a fella who's used to compartmentalizing and pushing all this stuff down, at first they're going to feel numb. And then if you keep digging, you're going to get a layer of anxiety.
Yep.
Then if you keep digging, you'll get anger. If
Yes.
you keep digging, you'll get shame.
Yep.
And then you'll get fear of losing control. And then
Yes.
finally, there's sadness, where you
Mm.
can grieve all of these experiences and start shifting worldviews and doing all this work. But you got to get through all these layers of defense mechanisms that are designed to bring us to externalize our experience so we can stay away from felt sense experiences that are vulnerable.
Exactly. Exactly. And what you just said there calling out all the different awful layers we have to dig through. That is
Yeah.
one thing that I love about it is. It's something I love about your TikTok channel is that everybody else's messages tend to be like positive, like, hey, do this and you'll have these wonderful feelings. Do this and it'll be great. It's gonna be so much fun. And I go on your TikTok channel and or I'll something will pop up for me. It's like, dude, here are some signs that you are actually getting better and they suck. Like it's this
Yeah.
uncomfortable. This is going to happen. This is going to happen, but that does not mean you have to quit. You are doing the right thing going. And I'm like, yes, as I'm pumped as I'm watching your thing, because so many guys, when they go through this process, they hit a painful moment and say, I must be doing this wrong. And they back off. What is it that leads you to be that realistic with people? Where is that coming from? And how do people resonate with that? Besides just me, how do other people resonate with that?
Um, where it comes from is probably growing up in a household with a lot of psychological abuse stuff going on, and being the only person that was speaking up for
Okay.
a pretty early age.
Yeah.
So that's always been, when things get tense, I get very direct. And over time, I've learned how to be really compassionate and patient about it. But
Mhm.
those have totally been learned things in adulthood. Um,
I love that.
how people respond to it, if I make sure that I have patience and compassion with it, people always resonate with it.
Yeah.
Um, I think at the end of the day, what people want to be able to do with each other is seek mutual understanding and truth. I think that's why so many different theologies are based on this concept.
Mhm.
And you know, in your core, even if you're second guessing yourself or other kind of like intrusive thoughts, like when someone is shooting from the hip with you.
Mhm.
We're
Yes.
we're programmed to understand this. It's like we're
Yes.
hardwired to vibe with that as humans. And at somewhere along the line, I realized, like, usually, if I tend to be coming from a good enough place, and I know if I've thought about what I have to say, and being intentional and kind about it,
Mhm.
um, it it tends to play out quite well. Every now and again, someone gets annoyed or upset with it, but they're also just kind of like, and I'm annoyed with myself that I'm annoyed with you. Kind of like we're not. It, it's hard to project unstable energy on that, I think.
Yes, it is. That is awesome. That is even that is a teaching moment though. Your honesty and your clarity and your openness, and then your ability to accept them as they are is probably refreshing to them because they've been shut down their whole life and told, "Hey, put a lid on it and then come back when you're really a grown up."
Totally,
That
totally.
is amazing.
One of my favorites is like, yeah, you. I am not your number. You are not my number one fan right now. Like, you don't like me. And I've learned that, and working in community health, community mental health, especially with kids and has been in the system, and just you don't
Mhm.
trust anybody who used to
Right.
be that awful diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder. Like,
Yes.
no, there's just complex trauma from
Yes.
piled up adverse childhood experiences, and
Exactly.
the amount of time that you have to spend in that space being like, you totally don't trust me, and really feel like you hate me right now. And like,
Absolutely.
you have to be there because that's what their experience is. And over time, you see it change.
Absolutely. So I'm an attachment specialist now, but I was a licensed marriage and family therapist for years, and my specialty was severe trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. That plus attachment and the way they fed into each other. And I would work with people who would come in and say, Adam, I've been through three other therapists. Everyone is just talking to me about trauma from a textbook. I don't know if this is going to work out, so I'm going to listen and I'll just do what I can. And I'd say, okay, dude, I've been treated for PTSD myself. I have been there. I understand where that's coming from. Let's talk about some of your options and let's talk about that harsh reality. And then you tell me what you're looking for in here. And like you said, they can tell when you shoot from the hip and they resonate. What is it for you that seems to catch men the most when they come into your office? What's your process or what makes them most comfortable if they haven't been comfortable other places? Because we both know people shop through therapists if it doesn't work very well. What does that look like for you? And what is different in your process with men that does pull them in?
I talk about gender socialization. I talk about it, like,
Yeah.
Um, I talk the differences between our experiences and people that are born in female bodies assigned this sex at birth and how they're treated differently and different things that we're taught to do and learn to internalize those pressures. I take a very psychoeducational approach and invite them into having a meta understanding of their masculinity as a part of themselves, which also kind of invites a beginner's mind type
Mhm.
of experience where you can see that you are the thinker of your thoughts and feel of your feelings, and it's you're not trapped in that first person perspective all the time.
Yes,
And then we
yes.
can start unwinding all this stuff. One of the first things that I always get into is in our language and in family therapist language is called a genogram, but it basically means like a fancy family tree.
Yes.
Go back 3 generations. I'm looking at migration histories, nations people came from, why they came, what the socioeconomic status was, how old everybody was in the family, how those tend to impact the dynamics, what their sibling
Mhm.
positions were. And we start mapping out what they realize I'm doing. They think they're just talking about their childhood, but what I'm doing is mapping out a framework of how they learn the defense mechanisms that they onboarded that are participating in the goals and how they're stuck.
Yes.
And then start checking out those spots with them. And I usually identify 1 or 2 super raw spots. Like when we get here, this is going to be super hard and you're going to want to blow it up, aren't you? Heck yeah, do it all the time. This is what it looks like. Like, okay, well, how will I know if you're getting there? How can I
Right.
help you regulate it? And we do pre-planning for if you step and you hear a click, and knowing that at some point that's going to happen. So how
Yes.
do we stay engaged with each other when it's happening?
I love
Um,
that.
so and we just like do a ton of analysis, pre-planning for and being real. Like, yo, we're about to go in the Black Forest. This is not that we're not going to play happy panic, whatever the game is, and I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. This is real, and parts of this are going to be hard. I want to
Mhm.
do this with you. I'm not willing to be treated poorly. So let's
Right.
figure out how would we get there. We can have enough grace with each other to make it.
I love that, is you are teaching a fully cooperative relationship in there. You are giving them that primal tribal experience of we are men existing together and cooperating, and we don't have to put a lid on it. We are fully human beings, and we're going to do this, accomplish this mission together. Basically, that's incredible. I love the genograms. I remember going through school, and they're teaching us the genograms, and I'm thinking, like, man, this is a lot of drawing. Is anyone going to really sit here in session with me and want to be drawing these genograms? And it's so funny because now I do a reverse genogram. So I take the genogram instead of their ancestors. I say, okay, and they say, Adam, I feel like I've got no purpose in life, no mission. There's no like, what is the reason? And I say, okay, dude, let's do this reverse genogram. Let's do where is your tree? I call it a tree of descendants. Where is your tree of descendants coming from in you? Whether they're biological, they're adopted, they're people you mentor, they're just people that you've changed their lives over the course of yours. Let's do a genogram from you as the origin point and show what that looks like. If you touch 3 lives, they touch 3 lives, they touch 3 lives, each of those 3 spiral out, you've got over the course of the next 100 years, maybe 120 people that are on your genogram. Now, what do you want that genogram to look like? What do you want your tree of descendants to look like? Do you want all these messes over here and this suicide over here and this, and be very real, like, man, this could be an ugly tree, or this can be a beautiful tree that you help them shape through them and their dynamic as well. And all of you work together to create a beautiful genogram coming from you. In your experience, how much do men resonate with that mission and that purpose versus just like, hey, let's feel better about ourselves?
A ton. I mean, I think all human beings resonate with it.
Yeah.
I think as men, again, we're so socialized to be really goal directed,
Mhm.
so that tends to fit even more directly. Going like, oh, that's why we're doing this, and this is about providing for future generations, and that you can start feeling like a hero in that,
Yes.
and like where you're going. But I think this is it's essential for all humans, and unfortunately, again, as men, we get so the socialization processes that we go through are designed to blind us to our
Yes.
gender stories. We get
Yes.
fed these narratives that like, racism doesn't exist and white is a race. And it's like, well, where do you come from? Where do people come from? Because we come from Whiteville. We came from nations that had their own cultures and their own stories, their own genesis. And
Right.
we need to remember what those things are.
Right.
That's how we stay connected to our stories, and also make sure that we don't get used by
Yes.
institutions who convince us to boil ourselves down to these identity markers that really don't mean shit.
Yes, and I love that you're willing to go there because so much of our culture, right? I started out all my social media on Twitter, and that was so polarizing. I'm kind of glad it got to be like one of the worst platforms that I got to grow up on social media wise as a creator, was because it is so much either you are all this one side of ideology or all this other side of ideology. You either are men are horrible nightmare creatures and they're just evil and you can't even speak positively about masculinity, or if you try to embrace your masculinity, you must be over there with that crew who wants
Yeah.
women to be treated like dirt. And it's so beautiful that I love talking with men like yourself, um, and people who have value for healthy men who can say, no, wait a minute, there is a middle ground, and you are allowed to step there and be okay with who you are. Just
Yeah,
make sure that who you are is who you actually want to be, not who either side tells you to be. Do you
totally.
find that a lot of men are nervous to bring that up and even acknowledge their manhood in those sessions at first? Is that difficult for them?
Totally.
Yeah.
Or they look at me like I have three eyes when I talk about some of the benefits of a feminist critique and how some parts of it also become hate groups.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I mean, the rich have always paid one half of the poor to kill the other half, and that's just another version of what's happening.
Totally.
And and yeah, I think learning to step in to and own your own opinions and viewpoints, even if you can't say that's how they're always going to be, even if they change and evolve, that's the only way for them to change and evolve too, is to
Yes.
you got to show up. um
Absolutely.
you're probably not going to make a whole lot of friends. It won't look like it on the surface, but those people weren't your effing friends to begin with.
Correct.
So like now at least you know, and you can start looking around at who is actually available and deal with the reality of that.
I love that. I love that. Teaching that, and once again, there's your realism of it's going to be hard, but at the end there is treasure waiting for you at the end that is totally worth that hard battle. I love that. There's your realism. You have something that was very interesting to me on your website, the balanced man plan. It walks men through attaining not just a characterization of manhood, but a full fleshed out version. Can you tell people a little bit about the balanced man plan and what it would offer?
Yeah. So I started creating that specifically when, as an offshoot of realizing childhood friends were dying in this way in droves, and then realizing how many other men were experiencing that.
Yeah.
So what the Balanced Man plan does, it has five core areas and four support areas, and went through all of the research I can find about, also anthropology minor, but all these intersections between human evolution, uh, uh, spirituality and contemplative practices,
Mhm.
and of course modern psychology, and kind of tracked where socialization of men from the old world gets us super stuck in
Yes.
modern society.
Yep.
And it is about building that foundation at your core, and then onboarding the other areas so you can be as strong and stable and sure of yourself and purpose driven as possible. Then a really interesting part of the Balanced Man plan is there's some talk about purpose and self-identity, and some of these concepts. When you get into it, you realize in completing the self-identity section that what the general message is like, you're not your khakis or your fucking bank account. Like the things that you thought were your self-identity are not. And we're
Yes.
just going to blow this up, and starts directing you back towards Genesis stories that are authentic to you, or your own value systems. Um,
Yes. I love that.
right? So that is really the connection between the everyday connection to purpose, and how we eventually get to faith, and not
Yes.
even in a spiritually or theologically based concept. We're all here for a reason. Like, we're all these unique little creatures who
Mm-hmm.
have different ways of processing information. We like different things, preferences, and good at different types of hunting and serving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And nature rewards biodiversity. It always has, it always will. Humans are not really good at biodiversity yet, because we're still pretty obsessed with the old world way of looking at tribalism and other and dehumanizing other. We have to kind of rediscover the one love and collective consciousness if we're going to be able to turn around what's going on Earth these days.
Mm-hmm.
And helping people get back in more to how do you operate with choices that you make every day that according to your own personal integrity. And over time, when we do that, we bet on ourselves over and over again. It builds a sense of purpose and agency about what we're doing and why, who we're doing it with, and how we're serving that. And then over even more time, we can see ourselves doing that according. It's over time, or like the fourth dimension, you can see yourself in 10 years and what that's going to look like. So it's even easier to continue committing to it. You develop faith in that vision. I think this is what the Egyptians meant when they're talking about third eye.
That makes so much sense. Something you said in there really resonated with me was the integrity, the personal code, the values that you hold, and living to those. That's another
Sure.
word for that might be honor. That was an old world concept that culture would teach you what honor was supposed to be, and you would adapt to the culture's code of honor. Nowadays, we don't really have that. We have a consumer culture, we have like identity culture, but we don't have this is a code of honor that you can stand behind. It would show that you are a person of value. And that is something when men come into my coaching, they come in and say, Adam, I really don't like myself. I don't like myself. I don't respect myself. I think I'm kind of a piece of crap. And I say, well, how do you feel about your honor? And they say, what does that mean? What is that? Should I know that? And I say, well, honor is this system. It's an internalized code of conduct that you have, and you have values. You just don't recognize them as your values yet because you have so consistently had to violate them to please others, to survive, to adapt. But you need to dig out your internal code of conduct, your honor code. Like you said, integrity is a huge one for a lot of men. You need to dig that out, and we need to find that and then show you how to make every decision about your life from the rest of your life, starting today, about that. So I have them write it on their bathroom mirror. I have them put it on their phone every morning of I am a man, of like their three big honor code, their three big principles. At the end of the day, a reminder, did you uphold your values today? And like 2-3 weeks, man, men turn around. They actually respect themselves just because they're living to the internal code that they have already built. It sounds like you've had that experience with men. How resonant have you found it with men? And why do you think it is that they resonate so hard with an internal code of honor like that?
I think that's what all animals are supposed to do. Even insects, is you have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yes.
If you don't, you have roots and you're a plant.
Mm.
They have a different way of experiencing the ecosystems that we share together. But all animals, you have to have a meaningful intentionality behind your behavior.
Yes.
And if we can root this into internally consistent, um, do no harm and take no shit mentality, then you get you cannot F with that person.
Right.
It becomes very, very difficult to manipulate, control, pull the snow over that individual, because they know how to find their due north. They know where the little dipper is. It
is wonderful watching men when they take that on and they suddenly become so firm in their stance in their own life, and they just and then they come back in and I say, how are these relationships that we were going to talk about that have gone pretty rough? And they're like, oh no, I already fixed that. No, I already talked to that guy. No, I already handled that. I'm like, dude, a month ago you were like wetting your pants when that guy would come at you, and now you're just telling him to just sit down and be calm. And you're like, yeah, I'm all right because I know what I'm at. And I say, well, how is he treating you? Well, actually, he's been a lot nicer to me, and he actually respects me. Huh.
yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing how the world reacts to a man who is just fully himself. And it is so wonderful to see that. And I'm so glad I got to talk to you about this. Where can people find you? What do you want? What do you want people to know? What do you want? Closing thoughts. Where can they find you? Tell us all the good stuff about you, man, because I want people to know about more about you so they can watch you like I do.
Thanks, man. You can find me on TikTok, as well as on Instagram, going under the handle Healing Humanity 777. You can also just look up my name. I'm sure it'll pop up. Got a few websites. The balancedmanplan.com website houses all those self-guided coaching plans. And there's a collections of content and instructional videos with these concepts built into it, and walking the folks through getting that information, as well as reconfiguring and reintegrating how it plays into their lives, and trying to get as much of the old world stuff out of there, and kind of being born into the brave new world. And then, at that point, if you feel like everything is cool, then that's awesome. Or at this point, you're now comfortable attuning to your feelings and talking to other people, you can go to a healthcare practitioner when that felt like a barrier before. Also got a personal website. You can go to logancohen.com and see more there. If you go to either TikTok or Instagram, the link in the homepage there will be to a subscription service that I use called Hey Daily. So if you subscribe to that, you'll get daily text messages sent to your phone with if you like the content that you see on social media. It's much more information rich versions of those.
Nice.
That are also free from the eyes of Zuckerberg or whoever the heck is running or not running TikTok, and wants to control all those pieces off the grid from it. If there's also a book that I wrote called How to Human Up in Modern Society, Heal Yourself and Save the World. You can find that on my website. Again, written. I actually wrote that to be a few different things. One is a self-help book that men would resonate with, that's about their journey specifically, that's not crapping on them for being men, and encouraging to think about the parts of their identity that are masculine, and what works and what doesn't, in a very non-judgmental way. But also to be used at like graduate level courses as a cultural competency text for men's issues, because that doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. I remember going through grad school and taking a family dynamics class, and they said, all right, here's an entire chapter on motherhood. And I was thinking, oh, that's a pretty good idea. A whole chapter just on motherhood. Sure. And then later on, there was a half of a page on fatherhood in the same book, just half a page. It was in a whole different section. It was like, oh, this is fatherhood. And the gist of it was, yeah, they're kind of there. They may or may not be important. We're not really sure. Here's this. I love if we could get more information like yours into grad schools. Maybe you and I can both transform those systems, because that would be good to have a balanced view of every human who needs help.
Absolutely. I do a lot of regional training for clinicians and social workers around cultural competency with men's issues. So it's something I do regionally in this area. I love.
Oh, beautiful. We need you in every city. That would be great. I'm going to include links. I'm going to have links to everything from Logan down in the description, guys. Click those and check him out. He is solid. I've been watching him for 6 months, and your material has only got better. So I'm going to keep watching. So thank you for coming on today. Thank you for talking to me. And thank you for taking a good sense stance for men and men's health. That is wonderful.